Let's do it. So
Is this
Jackie
your
D,
is this just your way of ensuring we have a new discussion every week?
well, I've got to get you in somehow.
Good to be here, brother. Thank you for having me.
No worries. So we had an epic chat last week of which I forgot to press the record on, but that was beautiful. I really enjoyed it. And it was a chat that was centered heavily around spirituality in business, which was very, yeah, it was awesome and it was refreshing. But seeing as though the people that are listening didn't get those knowledge bombs or watching, we're going to skip on to something else because we do this for us as much as we do it for you guys. So I'd love to. One thing that I admire about you, Jackie D, is that whenever you approach something new, whether it's a book launch or whether it's a business, there's no part of you that considers MVP really. Like, I feel like you dive really deep into businesses, especially when you believe in them. And
Yeah.
I like to think that I do something similar, but I've noticed that I don't do it on the same extent that you do it. And it's something that I admire in you. And I'd love for you to share what your kind of mindset is around jumping into a new project. I'll give a couple of examples. Like when you launched Unprofessional, the book, you had a book tour for that. You had it published through Wiley. That's a pretty big deal to do a book tour, a launch tour, launch parties, go for the best publisher. You know, when you get your branding done, you get it done at the highest level. When you ran the Unconvention, you're getting the biggest names you can think, literally like the biggest names in the whole country. And that can't be undervalued, because I see so many people that when they go into it, their self-worth reflects in the degree to which they put themselves out there, and they might attempt to do like a new app, and they'll just do like a really kind of crappy MVP version. They don't really give themselves that benefit of going full out and giving it everything. And I want to know, like, what's your like, how do you get to that point? What happens in your head?
Man, that's such a good question. To be honest, it's never something I've self-reflected on as succinctly as you've just put it. It's interesting. I was saying to my partner, Tiffany, the other day, what I so often feel, which isn't always a good thing, is a incredibly strong, almost physical feeling of pull from the middle of my chest to do things and to drive forward and to do it in the most powerful and meaningful way possible. I think I'm also somebody that has an incredibly high degree of self-belief, particularly when talking about macro projects like some of the ones that you were talking about. You know, I'm so focused on the outcome, and I'm so focused on making it as great as I possibly can. There's just no time or space in my head for self-doubt. The other thing is that I'm also quite an impatient person. And again, all of these characteristics are both strengths and weaknesses. There is absolutely duality to all of these, and there is another side of the coin. But in my impatience, I want everything to be fucking great. I want everything to be brilliant. And where that becomes a weakness is when I'm, managing my exec teams, for example. I want every single thing to be great all of the time. And every single thing can't be great all of the time. Sometimes, if you're a busy executive and you've got 12 direct reports and 14 different projects on at any given moment, sometimes, as a manager inside of an organization, you genuinely do need to do 8 things 60% well, because you don't have the luxury of doing 1 or 2 things 120%, and so I have had to learn to appreciate that and understand that, and particularly appreciate that as an entrepreneur, I've got a certain altitude and therefore a certain bandwidth and time and space that comes with my position. that not everybody in my organization has, because they're more captured in the day-to-day whirlwind than I am. And when I use whirlwind as a terminology for business as usual, the stuff that has to happen today, because I build businesses that can operationalize and work and scale beyond me, I deliberately build them such that I'm not in the whirlwind. And therefore, I'm able to focus on greatness, and I'm able to focus on making things as great as they possibly could be. But at the same time, I need to understand that not everybody has that same luxury, if you like, particularly inside of my organizations. And so I need to know, I've needed to hone my judgment over the years as to how much I can expect and when to expect and demand great things, and when to be okay with accepting things that are just good.
That's really beautifully said. And I've got some follow-up questions.
Such a good question.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, cool. So you very humbly explained that your ability to back yourself at that high level is a strength and a weakness. I really feel like I'd like to focus on how it's a strength because of the huge gap that I see with so many startup business owners and coaches and just people that are out there trying to make something of themselves in their life and live a fulfilling life. They more struggle to go full out with whatever it is that they do. And so what I think would be really beneficial is to reflect on the way in which you've gone full on with something and how it hasn't kind of hit home, but how going full on with it created benefit. Like an example, maybe we can go into the book launch of one of your books, or and doing the seminar tour, or trying a marketing campaign, for whatever feels like a really great example for you. And then also sharing an example where you've gone at something 100% and it's actually not paid off, but how it's ultimately allowed you to move forward with more experience, how you've big picture been better off as a result of that experience.
It's probably easier for me to talk to the second example, which is, as you say, it is the other side of the coin to, trying to do everything at 110%, which was started Entourage in 2010, grew it over 100% year on year to 2015. We were trading at a valuation of $60 million. We then went into accredited education. So we became a registered training organization, which I don't think any unaccredited training institution like us has ever. I've never seen another company go from unaccredited to accredited. I've never seen an organization make that transition. And so we made that transition, and we made it incredibly successfully. And we launched it, offering diplomas and advanced diplomas, government qualifications, government funding for those particular students. We came into that space so incredibly successfully and so incredibly aggressively from a business pivot standpoint.
And that would have been based upon the fact that if you can succeed in education in an unaccredited format,
exactly,
which doesn't have government funding, and you've got to do the marketing and sales, like no university is marketing and selling their university
that well.
courses.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. It's just
exactly
big
what it was.
Picture mainstream marketing. So then when you get a ticket of government's going to fund your course, it's just like, well, I've figured out the hardest puzzle possible here. So doing
that's exactly right. That's exactly marketing, sales, delivery, right? Because we had to, in unaccredited, you have to build delivery such that people choose to stay. It's not like they're here for 4 years because they're getting a bachelor degree in commerce, specializing in accounting. You have to nail every single delivery point, or they vote with their feet and they walk. And so we became incredibly strong across all of those different aspects. And then, heading into accredited, where we now had government accreditation, government funding. It was, we were one of the most successful. And the stats we were putting up by way of delivery, student satisfaction, student retention, student completion, were in some instances 10x the industry average was the degree of strength and muscle that we're bringing into the space. What then happened is the government changed the industry, and so it essentially tried to wipe out the entire industry and succeeded. And so what that meant for us is we were 3 months away from a monthly loss of $800,000. So 3 months away from losing almost $1 million a month with no business model that was going to survive beyond 3 months, no product suite that was going to survive beyond 3 months. We needed to rebuild the business model. We had 90 staff. Our expenses at that point were about 1.2 million a month. And so we needed to re-engineer the entire business model. And so
can you speak to the upside that your courage produced at that point before or is that confidential? Like, what were you guys doing in terms of revenue and stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was huge because we were still doing a little bit in unaccredited, but we're doing a lot in accredited. And so the upside was huge. I mean, we were doing more in a month than we were doing more in like month 2 of accredited than we were after 5 years of unaccredited per month.
Mm.
And we had a path to becoming a higher education institution. We were exploring Singapore, and I was spending a bit of time over in Singapore. And so it was also a very clear and linear path to international expansion. And so the upside was astronomical. It's just that the government brought changes in regulations to the space, and that kind of pulled the rug out from everybody. And so, yeah, I mean, the upside of the courage is undeniable. What I learned through that is what I hope most entrepreneurs learn. When you get to let's say the $10-20 million mark, is you need to start considering risk management, and you need to start considering downside to a greater degree than I was. And so from where I stand today, I can still hold the same degree of courage. I can still hold the same degree of taking everything 120%, but I'm also being considerate of what's the potential downside, what are the potential risks, and how we're minimizing and mitigating them along the way, which only gives me more courage, right? It's we're not talking two polar opposites here. We're talking part of the same whole, in that if you have learned and experienced that in the past, your perspective has not been holistic, meaning you've been so focused on upside and not focused enough on risk management. And then you feel the pain of that for a little bit. And now you know that your perspective is whole, and that you're not only seeing the upside, but you're also seeing the potential downside, and you're still giving it 120%. Well, that's the most powerful position I think we can be in.
And I feel that only like the lessons that really stick are those that come with blood. Like if you get a lesson where you fall and you actually hurt yourself, then the experience really solidifies. You don't forget that.
Particularly as entrepreneurs, man, like we're such experiential learners. I mean, and again, there's strengths and there's benefits and drawbacks to that, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just reflecting back on the bedroom situation again.
Yeah.
Which I'll let people linger on what that means. Jackie D's bedroom with a beautiful view, but essentially we're doing a strategy session, and I was so ignorant to the potential downside of being in business that I actually welcomed it. I wanted the failure, and I didn't understand I was just immature, ignorant. And then when I actually went through what I was asking for by growing I was like, I want to grow quickly and I want the pain so I can learn about it and then I can keep moving forward. But it was a reckless pursuit in the way I was approaching it. And you tried to warn me. And then when I actually experienced it, the thing that I was inviting, it was way worse than I expected. And I did really learn from it in an amazing way. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we need to be careful not to cut you too short there, because having worked with you for, I don't even know how long it was, 2, maybe 3 years, the amount of drive and energy and hunger that you bring to your life is probably up there with the top 3 people I've ever seen in my entire life. And so what the position there might have been a little bit of naivety there, but the position you were really coming from is, I'm so hungry for experience and I believe in myself to such a huge degree that, bring on the fucking failure, because that's going to add to my tool belt and that's going to make me even better. And then, challenging times do inevitably come along, and there's a period where we need to lick our wounds and everything like that, and it doesn't feel great. But that is true. Any challenges that one experiences do ultimately make them better in the long run. And I think that's what you were cognizant of. and to a large degree, it's what you created. And so, I mean, me too. So I think the courage that you see in me is equally as reflected in you.
Really appreciate you sharing that, because being at the stage of my developmental journey that I'm at the moment, coming back into business, there's muscle memory there, but it's also not real and in motion. So I'm remembering a lot of this. I've forgotten a bit of it over the last couple of years. So I really appreciate that. Really take that to heart. So
muscle memory is a great term to use. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think that I really want the listeners and the viewers to viscerally understand this superpower that you have. I believe I have it as well. But like I said, I've really seen you demonstrate it at a high level. And I can imagine, I know when we chatted last week, you mentioned that there's some things brewing that if you can pull off are going to be extraordinary. And even the understanding that it's going to require you to pull it off already gives a little bit of a taste to the enormity of what you drive after, and anyway, in whatever it is that you go for, which is just, it's a cool quality to have. So I want to dig a tiny bit deeper into this, and I want you to, like, what goes through your mind when you go to, like, let's say, for example, what's something that you can talk about that you're about to do next in the entourage, something that's already been made known, like you did the recession program, right? So you launched a recession program, which is to help people through coronavirus, which is a beautiful initiative and a very smart way to make sure that you're also doing well in this situation, which every business owner should be doing. And you went, cool, you came up with the idea and you went on launching, and you launched straight away. And then you brought a bunch of absolute legendary entrepreneurial guns into the program. So you've had like Michelle Bridges in there, or was it?
Not yet. Mish will probably be coming on. Yeah, Janine Ellis.
Yeah, Janine Ellis, who's one of like Australia's most famous entrepreneurs. Boom, you brought her in to speak. Like, what gives you the, like, what, how do you just think, well, I'm going to have, if this program's going to be successful, we need the best. Like, what goes through your head to make the call to bring in such big guns?
I'm just not interested in mediocrity. I'm just not interested in being an also-ran and doing anything insignificantly. Now, it was Gandhi that said, whatever we do in life will be insignificant, but it's important you do it anyway because you're the only person that will. And I think there's huge truth to that perspective as well. If you think about we're a speck of dust floating around the sun that has been here for less than 5 minutes and we won't be here in another 5 minutes, then everything we do is insignificant. Yes. So it depends on the perspective in which you're viewing it through. But, in business and in Australia, I mean, for me, my thought process is often two things. A huge driver for me is always, what does the world need now? What does the world need now? And so when something like the current crisis comes along, and I'm speaking to our members and I'm speaking to business owners, I'm building a feel for, and I'm building a deep insight into what are the challenges they're facing, how are they feeling, and what do they need? And so what does the world need now is a North Star driving question for me. The second piece of the puzzle for me is, what am I feeling, right? Like I was, and I'm so deeply concerned about the health crisis component of it and saddened by so much of what we're seeing around the world. I am and was also very excited by the opportunities that are going to be and are right now present for so many people around the planet, whether they're business owners to reimagine their business, or people to reimagine their lives, or even just sit in your fucking house for 6 weeks, sit down and spend time with yourself and think and read and meditate and pause. Man, like for spiritual beings and conscious humans like you and I, like the fact that that's being forced upon the world is arguably one of the greatest gifts I can think of that's ever been forced upon the species, right? And so that excites the fucking shit out of me. That really gets me going, particularly when this thing started to hit and everybody was a bit panicky. I didn't feel panicky because of 2016 and the strength that I was able to build in navigating adversity and commercial challenge for that period. And so I wasn't panicked. I was deeply concerned about the health implications, but I was deeply excited about the opportunity for human beings to pause and for business owners in particular to reimagine themselves. And that excited me. And so whenever there's what does the world need now? and what am I excited by? And whenever I can marry those two, that's when I get a huge surge and a huge charge that I literally feel in my chest, that drives me forward.
Would you say that is resonant in the heart? Like your heart pulls you forward? Like you get that nod?
I think the feeling thing is the heart, right? Like, what does the world need and how I feel? That feeling thing is a heart thing, but the charge comes from more like the center of me. It's such a peculiar thing to try and explain. I literally feel like my chest is being pulled forward.
And what happens if it doesn't? What happens if it flops?
If the project flops?
Anything. Like, let's use the project. What happens if the recession project just doesn't go ahead? What do you do?
I don't really care. I mean, in that instance, I wouldn't. I would just keep pivoting until it hit. I just keep pivoting until it worked. But in something like that, I mean, there's not a lot of there's no sort of financial investment, and so the downside isn't all that great. And so so let's say we release it. I mean that's just another month for us. Like we release content and have different sort of themed conversations all the time that don't hit, and I mean that's just part and parcel. That's
the physiological level. Like Amazon talks about one-way doors, two-way doors. With decision making, if it's a two-way door, it means the decision you can walk through when you make it, and you can easily walk straight back through the same door you came in.
Yeah,
that would be launching a Facebook ad. Doesn't go well. Who cares? Just build another one. You spend $100. But you know what? For most entrepreneurs launching a business, bar quitting a big hefty salary, like there's not really too many one-way doors. Most things are two-way doors. You're launching Facebook ads, you relationship building, you're attempting to close a sale. If you don't, logically, most things are two-way doors, but it's more of an emotional and mindset thing that I'm interested in here. And I know I'm hitting on the same point, but people that are listening are captivated by you. They want to learn from you, and they want to learn from me. And you are just making these decisions left, right, and center. So how are you just making the decisions?
Yeah. So in terms of let's say we launch this particular project and it flopped, my emotional response would be nil. It would be literally zero.
You don't care.
And that it hasn't always been that way. Like if we go back 8 years, I started Entourage 10 years ago now. If we went back 8 years, if we had a person attend an unconvention, there'd be 1,000 people there, and we get feedback from 900 of them, and one person leaves one bad comment, it would feel like a knife to my stomach, and I would literally lose sleep. I'd be like, what if this person talks to another person and they talk to another person? I mean, this kind of hate is going to catch on, and everybody's going to think that we're losers, and like it'd be one negative comment, and I would take it to the nth degree and worry about it for an extended period of time. I think dealing with feedback, and failure is just feedback, is something that you can intellectualize the fact that failure is just feedback, but what's more powerful than that is when you continually experience it for an extended period of time, and you realize that, hey, that person complained, and obviously we weren't a right fit for that person, and I don't feel great about that, but nothing really changed. There's still a whole bunch of people that we can serve. And then, hey, this happened, and we're still here. And then 2016 comes along, and we lose fucking millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it comes into the hardest 18 months of my entire life, and we're still here. And so you build it like an emotional muscle, where, to the point, to come back to your question, if it didn't work, there just would literally be zero emotional response. It would be it would be more of an analytical
curiosity.
Why isn't it hitting? What can we do better? Pivot, go, pivot, go, pivot, go. And that's just life.
Yeah, you mentioned like when I was running Unconvention back in the day, we had 1,000 people there, and one person didn't like it. But you've already got to the point where you're running a convention that's got 1,000 people at it.
Yeah,
I don't know any other business conference in Australia that's had 1,000 people at it. So that's already at a level of success. It's pretty amazing. And my experience getting into running seminars to start winning was so terrifying for me. And it's almost like the only way I could justify to myself to have a crack was by giving myself permission to fail. And the way I did that was like, I'm going to run a seminar a week until I'm going to give myself at least 3 years of doing a seminar a week. If it doesn't work by then, you know, whatever, but I'm going to at least try for 3 years. Cause I know after 3 years of doing them weekly, I'm going to get good. And I needed that. Without that self-talk or that kind of like distinction that made me feel safe, I couldn't do the seminar, because I attached my self-worth to, I would have attached my self-worth to the result of the first seminar, let alone the second, third, fourth, fifth. And then after I built a team, I feel like this is a cool thing that happens as an entrepreneur. When I had a team and built to the point that I had a team, which it took a lot of like energy to build it up to that point where I had a team. But once the team was there, it was just the muscles were developed, and the team made it mandatory to show up and be courageous and preach the vision. It just happened automatically. But now that I downsized and I'm restarting, the team is 1 employee, and I'm about to hire an operations manager, because it's damn hard to do everything yourself. And you know, I'm having to do I have to push it up again and get to that point where it's the ship's actually moving. There's momentum, and I'm feeling that. And it's actually takes courage. It's not easy, but I felt like once it was running, it was easier.
One of the things you'll find is that doing it the second time, you do it significantly faster with significantly less angst and significantly less mistakes. You know, it's the same. We're talking about something quite macro, which is building a fucking business, right? It's a huge project, but it's the same even if you look at a tiny project like Unconvention, for example. Not that Unconvention is a tiny project, but it's smaller than building a business, right? The first time we ran an Unconvention.
Depends what business, by the way. It's smaller than, it'd be way bigger than a lot of businesses that people start.
Yeah, right. But let's say you're running an event, for example. So the first time you do it, you're going to make so many mistakes. And after you've been doing it for 2 years, you'll look back at and remember how the first event was, and you'll literally laugh, not at yourself, but laugh at just how nascent you were in like we do this all the time. Like, mate, our first Unconvention was just was laughable. When Jay-Z started Rockaware, right? So Jay-Z made about $40 million from music. This is 15 years ago. He's made a lot more money from music since, but he made about $40 million from music. He then started Rockaware. In 18 months, he made $80 million from Rockaware. 18 months. When he first started Rockaware, you know how he started? They literally went and bought hoodies and went and bought sewing machines, and literally had a lady sitting there trying to sew the logos onto the hoodies. Like that was his strategy to start a fucking let's go buy a sewing machine, right? That's how nascent and undeveloped his thinking was. And obviously he obviously
iterated quickly,
because he had, with a brand like that, it makes it a lot easier to move quickly. But that's where he started. Similar, when we ran the first Unconvention, it was absolutely laughable. But when you do something the second time, whether it's an event, whether it's making clothes, whether it's building your second business, whatever it might be, it's incredible how much you learn from the first at bat, and incredible how faster and stronger you are the second at bat.
Yeah,
everything in life.
This comes back to what has been on my mind recently, and I've been really reminding myself of consistently, which is that your value as an entrepreneur, especially a visionary big picture entrepreneur, is literally your certainty, because your certainty actually puts value. If you're certain your team are more productive, it's invisible value. You're certain your team are productive, more gets done, more tangible money gets made, more value gets created. If you're certain when you're looking for investors, you will get the investors. If you're not, you won't. So you're like willing something to life just with your ability. Even if you don't feel 100% certain, you're convincing yourself you're certain, and you just charge forward, like just run forward and just have that certainty. And it is literally value.
Yeah. And then, as you say, it creates the results, which then fuels your certainty, which creates the results, which then fuels your certainty. And so it's an upward spiral. And it's the same with uncertainty and self-doubt in a way. It can produce mediocre results or poor results, which then, I knew I was never going to be good at it. And so you produce more mediocre results. And you see, I told you so. and you can get into a downward spiral. And so, yeah, I do agree. One's main asset in business is often certainty.
I talk about confidence being in three lenses. There's like physical layer, logical confidence, where you see a reflection of yourself in terms of results and you feel good about it. If the results aren't there, you can feel crap about it. So it's conditional confidence, but it's still real confidence. Then there's emotional confidence, which is unconditional, where you know yourself at a deep level, your strengths and your weaknesses, and you feel unconditionally loving towards who you are at your core. And then spiritual confidence, which is also unconditional, where you tap into the oneness of the universe and go, well, if I'm oneness and I am the universe, there's just nothing but love there.
Yeah.
But I feel like what people need initially in business is the physical confidence. And the way to get that is by being very, very quick to implement, quick to fail, and just to be sprinting in one direction, with lots of different ways, shooting like almost like a machine gun, just initially to get runs on the board.
Yep, 100%. And in doing so, you will build your muscle, you will build your self-confidence, you will build your certainty, which will be reflected in your results. And so goes the upward spiral.
And I remember for you, I don't know where this is going to go, but when we were catching up, you were mentoring me and you just gone through the start phase. You just got the notifications that you're about to have the hardest 18 months of your life. And I was like, how do you feel about that? And your response was, well, worst comes to worst, I can just have $1 million consulting business pretty easily, which is pretty cool. So you kind of, you had that self-worth to know if everything falls apart, at least back myself. Like worst case scenario is X. And I feel that reflecting on worst case scenario can be a powerful tool sometimes. So you actually know what it is that you're being nervous about or worried about.
That's the thing, man. You got to put it in perspective. Yeah, I've actually rethought that now. I reckon 3 mil would be my starting point, not $1 mil. But whether it's 3 mil, whether it's 100 grand, whether it's, you got to understand that right now there are people living in countries that don't have drinking water, that don't have a bed. When they sleep tonight, they will be worried about who is going to approach them and what's going to happen to them. Tomorrow, they're not going to have food. Their brother and their sister or their parents or all of the above are starving. Like the human condition can get really bad in some places of the world. And so if you just chart out that course in terms of worst case scenario, start a business, doesn't work, absolutely fails. Let's say one completely shatters all of their relationship equity, which would never happen unless you're completely unintegral. But this is assume that happens, and you can never start a business again, and you're unemployable. Worst case, in this country of Australia, we have more welfare per capita than any other fucking country in the world, right? Worst case scenario is, and again, I'm not proposing this as a aspirational path to go down. We're talking worst case scenario. Is you go and you get welfare for a bit, you end up finding a job or you create another business down the track, and you build again. But if what I'm trying to say is the absolute worst case scenario in Australia is that you are on welfare. And even by that measure, you are still wealthier than 99% of the world's population. And so if your worst case scenario, which if you're in Australia, this is true for you, is that you're going to be in, the 99.1 percentile rather than the 99.8 percentile, well then fucking relax and have a crack.
And this is where I feel like the unconditional confidence needs to come in, because most people aren't actually scared of the tangible problem that they're going to find themselves in not having money. They're scared of what people think of them if they find themselves in that tangible situation.
Cool.
And then there's that contrast versus, well, at the moment I have this car, and if I pursue this and I lose the car, what are people going to think of me? And I've been in this position where there's something to lose. Like with winning, I thought if I lost winning and it failed, then I was a failure and everyone was going to find me out for the fraud that I am. And that means you're very tentative and you've got a lot of emotion that goes into every decision. Whereas if you have that unconditional confidence, you can pursue whatever it is that you're doing with at least having self-worth and fulfillment, no matter what.
100%.
Very good backup.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Sarah Regalhuth, recently, and she's an incredibly successful entrepreneur. Has moved to
She's a
Colorado.
legend. I really like her.
Mate, she is an absolute legend. Like,
Mhm.
just particularly, you know, I don't know. I don't want to tell Sarah's story because I might mistell it. But, you know, going back 10 years or whatever, Sarah was quite a corporate person, and she started a financial advisory firm and did that in quite a corporate. I mean, it was new age and it was innovative and all. But, you know, her and her partner, they wore suits and it was from the outside, it was quite corporate. And she's gone from that to being to living such a free and uplifting lifestyle and doing all sorts of deep work on herself and
She's like a spiritual gangster kind of thing.
Complete fucking spiritual.
Do you know what's interesting? The very first Entourage event that I attended, the Unconvention, she was one of the speakers, and she was actually my favorite speaker because she was most real.
There you go.
I don't even think you were speaking then, by the way. So if you were, maybe you would have been my favorite. But yeah, she was super real. She had been running wealth enhancers for 2 years or a year or something like that, and was going hell for leather at it. But you got to have unconditional confidence to be able to pursue something like that, like the spiritual path.
Totally. And so where I was going with that, to your point around, you know, my having self-identity caught up in a business. We were just chatting on Zoom for like an hour and a half a couple months ago, and she said, she said, I've got an interesting view on failing as a business. I said, what is that? And she said, the way I view it is, I am an entrepreneur. This is who I am. It's not something I do, and I can't fail at who I am. And so if I am an entrepreneur and this business fails, well, it just means this business has played its part. I've learned the lesson, and I'm moving on to start the next business. And I thought that was such a powerful paradigm. Is I am an entrepreneur. It's who I am, and no one or no thing and no failure, no event, no lack of event could ever take that away from me. And it's such a powerful paradigm to come from, because you can't fail at being who you are, regardless of the failures or the lessons that one might learn along the way.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So such a liberating feeling to realize you can't fail. Yeah, cool. Well, I've loved this chat. Let's wrap it up, and so we can keep some content for the next one that we do. But I'd love for you to leave.
Is this the part where you tell me you have been recording and are coming back next Thursday?
I wish. But we're going to have to wait a few months for the next one, unfortunately. It's been a really, what I liked about this chat was we went deep in the important stuff.
Yeah, I liked it, man.
Yeah, I'd love for you to summarize what you'd like people to get out of this. Like, what if people could take one thing, and it could be something we haven't spoken about? What do you want people to leave this interview with?
I think the best point that was made this interview was what you opened it with, which is if one can develop and foster within themselves a confidence to give 120% to everything, and try and do the main projects in their life with an element of greatness, that's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage in business. It's a huge it adds meaning and value to your life. It means that, you know, you're in a position of leadership rather than a position of following. And so I think that's a really powerful. I mean, that's something that I'm going to be going away and reflecting on. So I think others should too.
Yeah, beautiful. So thanks so much for joining us today, man. I wanted to first and foremost get people to go to your Instagram, because I know that's where you hang out most, and that's handle is Jack Delosa, Delosa. So Jack Delosa, and send him a message thanking him for jumping on today, but also talking about what you got from it. I know for me, when I jump on an interview, I love hearing that. I love just connecting with the people that tuned in, because you're invisible to us right now, but let's change that. So yeah, go send Jack a message and make comment to what you got out of today. And the second thing I wanted to do to wrap it up with was just to honor you again. Your character was really shown to me, as funny as it was, when I didn't record the last interview, and the backup failed as well. And I sent you a message, and I was feeling pretty crap after that because it was a sick interview. And I was like, man, Jack just gave his time for this. And I sent you a message, and your first response is to like try to not make me feel bad about it, and then instantly rebooked another meeting for this week. And I know that we're mates, and I know that you find the time, but I didn't expect you to do it the next week and make time for us to have a chat. And it really, you know, this is one thing that I'm just, you're a really epic dude. And I really appreciate you, and just wanted to make that clear. And I hope everyone that's listening really gets that, because yes, you're the successful entrepreneur and whatnot, but you really are an awesome human. So
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And reflect on why let's call it the fuck up from last week of not recording. You know, what is it about you and the relationship equity that we hold that causes me to get that message, hysterically laugh for a few minutes, respond to you hysterically laughing, and we'll you the next week. You know, what's being reflected to you is your own character and your own self. So I want to acknowledge that as well.
Appreciate that, man. Massive love.